The struggling artist donates her painting to the charity auction, never expecting that beneath layers of her own work, a Renaissance masterpiece lay hidden, waiting to change everything. Maya Winters stood in her cramped studio apartment, the late afternoon sunlight slanting through the single window, illuminating dust particles that danced in the air like her fading dreams. The space smelled of turpentine and disappointment. She ran her fingers over the canvas before her, her latest work, feeling each brushstroke beneath her fingertips like Braille, a language of failure she'd become fluent in. 32 years old, and what did she have to show for it? A stack of rejection letters from galleries, a bank account that hemorrhaged more than it received, a family who had long since stopped asking when she'd get a real job. Even her refrigerator mocked her with its emptiness. She stepped back from the painting, a landscape of a Tuscan hillside at sunset, inspired by a place she'd never been. Maya had always painted places she'd never visited, emotions she'd never fully experienced, a technique her former professor once called brilliant intuition, but now felt more like elaborate pretending. Her phone vibrated against the paint-splattered table. She ignored it. Probably another bill collector. They'd been relentless lately. The eviction notice taped to her door a week ago had made it clear she had until the end of the month. 2 weeks to come up with 3 months back rent or find herself and her canvases on the street. When the phone buzzed again, she sighed and wiped her hands on a rag that had once been white but now resembled an abstract painting itself. The caller ID showed Ellie, her oldest friend from art school who, unlike Maya, had sensibly pursued art administration instead of the uncertain path of creation. "I'm not donating anything, Ellie," Maya answered without preamble. "I have literally nothing to give except debt." "Hello to you too, sunshine." Ellie's voice came through, warm and persistent. "And you have your art. The Children's Hospital fundraiser is this weekend and we're still short on auction items." Maya's laugh was hollow. "Nobody wants my work. You know that better than anyone." There was a pause, and Maya could almost see Ellie choosing her words carefully. "Your work is beautiful, Maya. Just because the commercial art world hasn't recognized it yet doesn't change that." The "yet" hung between them, a small mercy of a word that Maya no longer believed in. She glanced at the Tuscan landscape, seeing suddenly all its flaws, the forced perspective, the colors too bold to be authentic. "I'm thinking of quitting," Maya said, the words escaping before she could catch them. She hadn't admitted that to anyone, not even herself. "I've been painting for 15 years, Ella. Maybe it's time to admit I was wrong." "Maya, I can't pay my rent. I'm eating ramen for every meal. I sold my grandmother's jewelry last month just to buy supplies." Her voice cracked on the last word, and she blinked rapidly at the ceiling. "I'm tired." The silence that followed was filled with understanding. Ellie had witnessed Maya's struggle from the beginning, the early promising scholarship, the gradual slide into obscurity, the stubborn refusal to compromise her vision for commercial appeal. "Give me one painting," Ellie finally said, her voice gentle but firm. "Just one, for the kids. And then I'll help you figure out whatever comes next." Maya's gaze drifted to the corner of her studio where a large canvas stood facing the wall. She hadn't looked at it in months, one of her more ambitious pieces that she'd abandoned after a particularly scathing gallery rejection. "Fine," she whispered. "I have one you can have. It's not finished, but maybe some CEO's wife can hang it in their guest bathroom and feel charitable." "Thank you," Ellie said, ignoring the bitterness. "I'll come by tomorrow to pick it up." "And Maya? This isn't the end. It might be a turning point, but it's not the end." After they hung up, Maya approached the forgotten canvas like it was a sleeping beast. When she turned it around, she winced. She had been attempting something different, a reproduction of a Renaissance-style painting, with modern elements interwoven. The figures were half-finished, the background only roughly sketched in. It had been an experiment in blending old and new techniques that she'd abandoned when her confidence had shattered. "Good enough for charity," she muttered, carefully wrapping it in brown paper. At least it would be out of her apartment, one less reminder of her failures. The next day, Ellie arrived with her usual whirlwind energy, bearing coffee and optimism in equal measure. She assessed Maya's apartment with a quick glance, noting the stack of unpaid bills, the bare cupboards, the dark circles under her friend's eyes. "The wrapped one by the door?" Ellie asked, already moving toward the large package. Maya nodded, clutching her coffee like a lifeline. "It's unfinished." "Sorry. Sometimes unfinished works have their own appeal," Ellie said, hoisting the canvas. "They show the process, the vulnerability." Maya didn't respond. Vulnerability was exactly what she didn't want to show the world anymore. "The auction is tomorrow night," Ellie continued, maneuvering the painting toward the door. "You should come. Free food, open bar, and you can see who buys your piece." "I'd rather get a root canal," Maya said flatly. Ellie paused at the door. "Maya, this isn't like you. The artist I knew in college wouldn't give up, even when Professor Harmon said her technique was derivative and sophomoric. That artist was delusional. That artist had hope." Ellie's eyes softened. "Just think about coming. Wear something nice. Pretend to be someone else for the night if you have to." After Ellie left, Maya stood in the center of her apartment, feeling strangely lighter with the painting gone. She walked to her easel and stared at the Tuscan landscape. With a sudden, decisive movement, she grabbed it and turned it to face the wall, like a child being punished. Maybe Ellie was right. Maybe she needed one night away from these walls, from the suffocating failure. One night to pretend before she packed it all away and became someone more practical, more successful, someone who didn't hurt quite so much. She opened her closet and pushed aside paint-splattered clothes until she found the one nice dress she owned, a deep blue number she'd bought years ago for a gallery opening that had ended with her name misspelled on the program and not a single inquiry about her work. "One last night," she told herself, holding the dress against her body. "One last night as Maya the artist, before I become whoever comes next." The evening of the auction arrived, and with it, an unexpected spring storm. Maya stood under the awning of the Children's Hospital Auxiliary Building, raindrops sliding down her umbrella as she gathered her courage. Through the windows, she could see the glittering event in full swing, well-dressed people holding champagne flutes, examining the artwork displayed along the walls. Her stomach churned. She'd almost talked herself out of coming 3 times. Why subject herself to watching someone buy her painting out of pity or, worse, see it go unsold entirely? "Are you going in or just admiring from afar?" The voice startled her. Maya turned to find an older gentleman sharing her shelter from the rain, his silver hair slightly damp at the temples, kind eyes crinkling at the corners. She hesitated. "I'm gathering my courage." His smile was understanding. Not a fan of these kinds of events either. They can be overwhelming." "I'm Thomas, by the way." He extended his hand. "Maya." She shook it briefly, noticing the calluses on his palm that seemed at odds with his expensive suit. "Well, Maya, what do you say we brave it together? I find these things are more tolerable with an ally." Something about his gentle demeanor made her nod. They entered side by side, surrendering their wet outer garments to the coat check. Maya immediately scanned the room for her painting, but couldn't spot it among the dozens of artworks displayed. "Are you looking for something specific?" Thomas asked, offering her a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. She paused, unsure how to explain. "I donated a piece. I'm curious where they put it." "You're an artist? How wonderful. What's your medium?" "Oils, mostly." She took a sip of champagne, the bubbles sharp on her tongue. "Though lately I've been reconsidering my life choices." Thomas laughed, a warm sound that seemed to come from deep within him. "As someone who reconsiders his life choices regularly, I can relate. Shall we look for your work?" They moved through the crowd, Maya growing increasingly self-conscious in her one good dress that was at least 3 seasons out of fashion. Thomas, however, seemed oblivious to the sidelong glances from the wealthy patrons, keeping up a gentle stream of conversation about the other artworks they passed. Finally, in a side room, Maya spotted her canvas. Unlike the other pieces that were prominently displayed with dramatic lighting, hers was tucked in a corner, still partially wrapped in the brown paper she'd used. Her heart sank. "Is that it?" Thomas asked, following her gaze. "Yes," she said, her voice small. "Looks like they didn't even fully unwrap it." Thomas approached the painting, studying it with an intensity that made Maya uncomfortable. He leaned in close, examining the edges where the paper had been pulled back to reveal just a portion of the canvas. "May I?" he asked, his hand hovering near the edge of the paper. Maya shrugged, embarrassment burning in her cheeks. "It's not finished. I abandoned it months ago." With careful movements, Thomas pulled the paper back further, revealing more of the canvas. His intake of breath was sharp and sudden. "What is it?" Maya asked, moving closer. "This texture," he murmured, fingers hovering just above the surface. "The layering technique?" He turned to her, eyes alight with interest. "Did you paint over an existing work?" Maya blinked, confused. "No, I always prime my own canvases. I was trying something different. Renaissance techniques with modern subjects." Thomas was shaking his head slowly, a strange expression crossing his face. Maya, I think there might be something underneath your work. Something older. That's impossible, she said, but even as the words left her mouth, she remembered finding the canvas at an estate sale years ago. It had been dirt cheap because of water damage to one corner. She'd assumed it was just an old, worthless stretcher that she could reuse. Thomas was now examining the painting from every angle, his earlier social discomfort forgotten. I'd need better lighting and tools to be certain, but... He straightened, looking at her with an intensity that made her step back. I'm a conservator at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. This layering, these pigments, they have the hallmarks of 16th century Italian work. The room seemed to tilt beneath Maya's feet. That's not possible. If I'm right, Thomas continued, his voice low and urgent, you may have painted over a very old, potentially very valuable piece. Before Maya could process this, Ellie appeared at her side. Maya, you came! She glanced between Maya and Thomas, then at the partially unwrapped painting. I see you found your donation. I'm so sorry we didn't have time to display it properly. There was a mix-up with the delivery and... Ms. Winter's painting requires immediate professional attention, Thomas interrupted, his tone suddenly authoritative. I'm Thomas Harrington, head conservator at the Met. This appears to be a palimpsest situation, possibly a significant historical work underneath. Ellie's eyes widened. Are you serious? Quite. Thomas turned to Maya. With your permission, I'd like to withdraw this from the auction and take it to my lab for examination. If I'm right, and I rarely make mistakes in these matters, this could be extraordinarily significant. Maya felt as though she were floating outside her body, watching the scene unfold. Yes, of course. But the auction, Ellie began. I'll make a personal donation to cover whatever you might have received for this piece, Thomas said firmly. Double it, in fact. The next few hours passed in a blur. The painting was carefully removed from the auction. Thomas made arrangements for its secure transport to his laboratory at the museum. Maya found herself exchanging contact information with him, nodding numbly as he explained the process of art authentication and conservation. It will take time, he told her as they stood outside the building, the rain having subsided to a gentle mist. Several weeks at minimum, but I'll keep you informed every step of the way. I still don't understand how this is possible, Maya said, feeling untethered from reality. It was just an old canvas I found at an estate sale. Thomas smiled, the streetlights reflecting in his eyes. Art has a way of finding the right people, Maya. Sometimes a painting chooses its caretaker as much as the other way around. As she rode the subway home that night, Maya's mind spun with possibilities. Even if Thomas was mistaken, something had fundamentally shifted. For the first time in years, she felt a flutter of something that resembled hope. 2 weeks crawled by. Maya's landlord granted her a temporary extension after she explained about the painting, though his skepticism was clear. She spent her days alternating between staring at her phone, willing it to ring with news from Thomas, and standing before her easel, brush in hand but unable to begin. When Thomas finally called, his voice vibrated with barely contained excitement. We need to talk. Can you come to the museum today? The conservation laboratory at the Metropolitan Museum of Art was a world Maya had never entered, a sterile, precisely controlled environment full of specialized equipment and intense concentration. Thomas met her at a security entrance, his face alight with discovery. Thank you for coming so quickly, he said, leading her through a maze of corridors. What we've found, well, it's best if you see for yourself. In a large workroom, Maya's canvas lay on a special table under powerful lights. But it was transformed. Much of her work had been carefully removed, revealing underneath colors and forms that took her breath away. Even to her untrained eye, the difference was stark. The richness of the pigments, the masterful technique, the luminous quality that seemed to glow from within the paint itself. It's 16th century Florentine, Thomas said, his voice hushed with reverence. We've identified it as a lost work by Lorenzo Lotto, a contemporary of Titian and Raphael. The provenance team is still tracing its journey, but preliminary analysis suggests it disappeared from records around 1648. Maya stared at the partially revealed painting, a Madonna and Child, the Virgin's face emerging with such tenderness and humanity that it made her throat tighten. How did it end up at an estate sale in Brooklyn? Art takes remarkable journeys, Thomas said. Wars, theft, private collections, paintings change hands countless times over centuries. Someone along the way may have painted over it to hide it, or perhaps they simply didn't recognize its value. Another conservator approached with a tablet displaying magnified images of the painting's layers. The cross-section analysis confirms it. Lapis lazuli in the blue pigments, vermilion mixed with lake for the reds. Textbook Renaissance technique. Maya's legs felt weak. She sank onto a nearby stool. What happens now? Thomas sat beside her. That's largely up to you. Legally, the painting belongs to you since you purchased it, even unknowingly. Once restoration is complete, it will be worth a considerable sum. Millions, certainly. The word hung in the air between them. Millions. Enough to pay her rent. Enough to never worry about bills again. Enough to paint whatever she wanted for the rest of her life without concern for commercial appeal. The museum would be interested in acquiring it, of course, Thomas continued carefully. But there would also be private collectors. Auction houses would compete for the opportunity to handle the sale. Maya looked again at the emerging masterpiece, at the love evident in every brushstroke, the devotion and skill of an artist who had died centuries before she was born. Can I think about it? She asked. Of course, Thomas said. This is a lot to process. I've arranged for security to protect the painting while restoration continues. Take all the time you need. As Maya left the museum that day, stepping into the golden late afternoon light, the world seemed different, sharper, more vivid, as if she too were emerging from beneath layers of obscurity. She walked aimlessly through Central Park, watching children play, couples stroll hand in hand, artists sketching on benches. The possibility of financial security should have been all-consuming, but instead, she found herself thinking about Lorenzo Lotto. Had he struggled as she had? Had he doubted his worth, his vision? Had he ever considered giving up? And what would he think, knowing that centuries later, his work would be rediscovered because a failing artist had unwittingly preserved it beneath her own abandoned dreams? In the days that followed, Maya found herself drawn back to the museum, watching the painstaking restoration process. Thomas welcomed her presence, explaining each careful step as the conservators gently removed her paint to reveal the masterpiece beneath. She should have felt embarrassed, her amateur work being erased to expose true genius, but instead, she felt a strange connection forming across the centuries. He used circular brushstrokes here, just like you did in the sky portion of your work, Thomas pointed out one afternoon. Your instincts echo his technique in fascinating ways. Pure coincidence. Maya demurred. Perhaps. Or perhaps something more interesting. Thomas studied her face. Have you been painting since our discovery? She shook her head. I haven't been able to. It feels presumptuous now. That's a shame, Thomas said quietly. One artist's greatness doesn't diminish another's voice. As the restoration progressed, news of the discovery leaked to the art world. Maya found herself thrust into unexpected limelight, interviewed by art publications, approached by galleries suddenly interested in her work, courted by auction houses eager to handle the eventual sale of the Lotto. Through it all, she felt strangely detached, as if watching someone else's life unfold. The only times she felt truly present were in the quiet conservation lab, watching the Madonna's compassionate eyes emerge from centuries of hiding. We're nearly finished, Thomas told her one morning, 3 months after the initial discovery. The painting was now almost completely restored, a luminous example of Renaissance mastery. The board will make a formal offer next week, but I wanted to give you time to consider all your options. Maya nodded, her gaze fixed on the Madonna's face. There was something in that expression, a knowing serenity, a quiet strength, that moved her deeply. What would you do? She asked suddenly. If it were your decision? Thomas considered this carefully. Professionally, I should advocate for the museum's acquisition. Personally, he paused. I believe art like this belongs where it can speak to as many people as possible. That evening, Maya returned to her apartment, the same cramped space, but no longer under threat of eviction thanks to a generous finder's fee the museum had already provided. She stood before her empty easel, running her fingers along its familiar edges. For the first time in months, she picked up a brush. She didn't overthink it, didn't plan or sketch. She simply let her hand move across a fresh canvas, laying down colors in loose, expressive strokes. Hours passed unnoticed as she worked, pouring something new into the emerging image. Not a copy of the Lotto's technique, but something influenced by it while remaining uniquely her own. Dawn was breaking when she finally stepped back, muscles aching, to see what she had created. It wasn't a Madonna, but it carried something of that same compassionate gaze, A modern woman's face, lined with experience, eyes that had seen hardship but remained kind. Behind her stretched a landscape that existed nowhere on Earth, part Tuscan hillside, part Brooklyn rooftop. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't Renaissance mastery, but it was honest in a way her work hadn't been for years. She had painted not what she thought would sell, but what she felt, the strange journey of the past months, the connection across centuries, the rediscovery of something lost. The following week, Maya walked into the museum boardroom, her decision made. The directors sat around a massive table, expressions eager but controlled as Thomas made formal introductions. Ms. Winters, we're prepared to offer $8 million for the Lotto Madonna, the museum director said without preamble. We understand you've had other offers, but we hope you'll consider— I'm donating it, Maya interrupted, her voice steady despite her racing heart. To the museum, with conditions. A stunned silence fell over the room. Thomas, seated to one side, couldn't hide his smile. What ... Conditions? The director finally managed. That it be permanently displayed in the main Renaissance gallery, not put into storage. That it be called the Winter Madonna in all official documentation, after my grandmother who always believed in my art when no one else did. And that the museum establish an annual residency for struggling artists who, like me, need to be reminded why they began creating in the first place. The director glanced at the board members, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Those terms are surprisingly reasonable, Ms. Winters. But are you certain? The financial security this sale could provide. I've never been after security, Maya said, realizing the truth of it as she spoke. I've been after meaning. This painting wasn't meant to make me rich. It was meant to remind me why art matters. The paperwork took weeks to finalize. During that time, Maya painted with a renewed intensity, producing work that felt both familiar and entirely new. She found herself exploring themes of discovery, layers, hidden beauty revealed, not literally, but in the emotional landscape she created. The day the Winter Madonna was unveiled in its permanent gallery location, Maya stood back from the crowd, watching visitors' faces as they encountered Lorenzo Lotto's genius for the first time in centuries. The painting seemed alive under the carefully calibrated lights, the Madonna's eyes following viewers as they moved, her serene expression holding secrets across time. Thomas found her there as the crowd thinned. Quite a different outcome than we expected that rainy night at the charity auction, he said. Maya smiled. Sometimes the greatest gift isn't what you find, but what it helps you rediscover in yourself. Your new work is remarkable, you know, he said. The gallery opening next month? You'll be ready? A flicker of the old doubt surfaced, but Maya pushed it aside. I'm ready. Not because I think everyone will love it, but because I love creating it again. They stood in comfortable silence, gazing at the Madonna. In that moment, Maya felt a profound connection, not just to Thomas, who had become a friend and mentor, but to Lorenzo Lotto himself. Two artists separated by centuries, but united by the same struggle to create meaning, to see beauty, to persevere. He never knew how his work would touch the future, Maya said softly. None of us do, Thomas nodded. That's the leap of faith every artist takes, creating something that outlives them, speaks when they no longer can. As they left the gallery, Maya glanced back one last time at the painting that had changed everything. The Madonna seemed to smile just slightly, a secret shared between women who understood that sometimes true worth remains hidden until exactly the right moment, when it can do the most good, bring the most healing, inspire the most hope. Outside, the spring sunshine bathed the museum steps in golden light. Maya breathed deeply, feeling possibility unfurl within her like a canvas awaiting the first brushstroke. Her next painting was already taking shape in her mind, not of places she'd never been or emotions she'd never felt, but of the truth she now understood. That every artist stands on the shoulders of those who came before, that every act of creation is a conversation across time, and that sometimes the most valuable masterpieces are the ones yet to be painted.